Good morning to you and welcome. Good evening to you, sorry, and welcome to this program of Walter Rodney Groundings. I'm your host, Dion Abrams, and on the program with me this evening, as you can see, is brother Takuma Ogunse. Together, we'll be talking about the topical issues that have been occurring in the country. I think the primary issue that most people have been talking about is the recent protest on the east coast of Demerara. We'll possibly look at some other issues. I want to welcome you to Walter Rodney Groundings, Brother Takuma.
It's a pleasure to be here after a
Mm-hmm.
long absence. We
Okay.
should assure our viewers that when they don't see us, we're still doing political work, you know.
All right.
So the absence is in most cases is unavoidable.
The WPA has, apart from the CAMS morning show and the Politics 101, we've started a program on
Comes to
CAMS TV. You want to talk about that?
well,
Just let people be aware.
very briefly, the WPF took about 7 weeks ago took a decision that the party need to have a presence on the
Online,
social media
online platform.
platform, because right now, since the pandemic, that has become an important platform of communications. And we began a program which we call WPA Day Clean program, okay, which is a party program, and there we express parties' positions and interpretations on the situation. So we want to invite viewers, on Monday evenings at 6, between the hours of 6 p.m., 6:30 p.m. and 8 o'clock. You could join us on CAMS TV for the WPA Day Clean Groundings.
All right, so there it is for you. Brother Ogum did say that we're still doing political work, and that work is now extended to the social media, and it will be good for those who have the time to tune in to hear the views of the Working People's Alliance on issues as they unfold in Guyana. Um, we are going to talk about the Quentin Bacchus murder. We cannot take it off the grid at the moment, and but briefly, you have had to respond to some folks on the issue of the continued press for Guyanese to benefit from the oil revenue in the form of cash grants. It was recently raised again at the Walter Rodney Remembrance commemoration activity, and there were responses that are suggesting possibly that it might not be, either in the form that it is suggested, may not be the best, or some people are of the view that it is not uh, good at all, but we see it happening all over the country. You want to briefly talk about the response that you.
Um, the response is basically a response with the former finance minister,
Okay.
um, and I explained in 2 letters my attitude towards his approach to the matter.
Mm.
I mean, I don't want to spend much time making
Yeah.
it an issue,
Yeah.
but there were two disturbing approaches that worry me, and it is approach that was consistent from the time the WPA 4 years ago. Dr. Clive Thomas speaking in Buxton, you were there when he first announced the policy on the behalf of the WPA to fight for 10% of the oil revenues to be used to pay 1 million Guyana dollars, which is roughly rough at the time, at least about 5,000 US dollars
Oh,
to
so.
each Guyanese household annually. Okay, and Dr. Thomas did that based upon his understanding of the volume of money and the kind of resources that we're talking about And he felt that there would come a time very quickly, given the anticipated production rate in Guyana, where the government will be insufficient revenues to implement such a scheme. So we threw it out in Buxton. And you remember at that time we were part of the APMU AFC. And the first response we got publicly from Granger was that he don't know what was cash transfer. He dissed it. When anybody, and it's so doing it, he make himself look very small, because you can't be a head of state. So a major compliment of your party announcing economic policy, not on the behalf of the government, but to throw a policy in the public discourse. Even if you don't know it, you call on your finance minister, you call on your technical people to brief you, or you go up on Google and you get it. But he did that because he wanted to diss the proposal, and I viewed it because it came from WPA. And having done that, this is my judgment, looking at this, Granger having done that and set up that attitude in the public space, the finance minister and all the PNC people thereafter had to find ways of marching behind Granger's position. Okay? Now, Jordan revisited the thing 2 years after he's out of government. Therefore, he's not constrained by those kind of considerations. And I thought, and I want to say this before I continue, because I think Jordan, since he left office, are doing tremendous work, on CAMS TV and Politics 101, especially CAMS TV, to educate Guyanese on economic matters. And I think he has been doing an excellent job. But let's get back to the cash transfer business. But what I saw he did there on the program is to continue, the subtle hostility to the program and trying to misrepresent what,
Professor
Thomas is seek to do. And I don't want to, as I tell you, want to spend a lot of time on it. But what they've done, since Granger's dissing the thing, is to seek to confuse the proposal. Like if WP and Thomas is saying all the oil money must be used for cash transfer, not making the point that we're talking about 10%. Therefore, the government have 90% to implement all kinds of other social and other developmental projects. But when they propose even alternatives, they do it like if, we were asking for all the money. And I felt it was very dishonest. And I felt that, I need to, take, express a public difference with them. And so that's explain that.
All right, well, the proposal is out there, but even though the incumbent administration, they have somehow dovetailed the proposal and have been using it in ways that are only seeking to channel resources in one particular direction, all right? And they're hiding because they're not saying that this is cash grant in a direct way, but they're doling out the monies and are using that proposal to basically feed into the base that they believe will support them, right? And I don't know if the others who are still trying to throw cold water on the proposal are not seeing, what is happening.
Look, first and foremost, the PVP is not implementing the WPA cash transfer proposal. What they're doing is doling out money, like Father Christmas, and they're tying it to patronage. Our proposal is one which take into consideration that the national resources belongs to all Guyanese, and Guyanese have as an entitlement the right to get this share of the resources in this form, regardless of the political loyalties, regardless of race, color, class, universal, rich, poor, everybody. This is straight our proposal. So it is not the doling out of money for political favors. It is an entitlement the owners of the resources has, that the state and the government ought to give them.
I understand what you're saying, Ogum, but what I'm saying, that is the idea that has festered this move by them to to you know.
I don't know. Even without that, the PP have demonstrated since '92. There's a lot of money to the
Yeah, yeah,
constituents. And whether the WP have called for cash transfer, now the PP have been doling out money. This is one thing about the PP, you know. The PP is like the APM, you know. The PP is very clear, you know, on how to deal with the constituents, and they understand the relationship between state bribery and state corruption benefits them, because that is how that's the relationship they developed with the constituency over the last 23 years when they were in power, and they just continue the same thing. So that is their standard of governance.
Yeah, but that brings me to the recent protest on the east coast of Demerara. Uh, First of all, is the march justified?
Okay. Now, I want to begin by trying to set the context, the wider socio-political context of this development, because the march can be seen in isolation
Well,
to the situation in the
overall
country, the overall situation in the country. But because we only have a limited time, we got to pick and choose and narrow down it. I want to narrow down it at this moment. I want us to go through the state of the African community. Okay, a day before the shooting, okay, of Bacchus. Okay, so we're trying to look what our state from the time the new government was, from the time Granger announced acceptance in the results. Okay, it set a whole motion into the whole country, but right now we're talking about the African community. And when we watch that, it's a motion of demoralization. And then the people that come to power, they begin to engage in selective aggression on the African community of all forms. So we have had 2 years of a lot of pressures and self-searching. You remember right here, the argument is when we're going to protest, you know, we're taking all of these blows, when we're going to respond, this one gets shoot, the one gets shoot, nothing ain't happening. So that was the mood prevailing. And then the PPP was spreading the propaganda that the fact that our community is relatively non-responsive to the aggression, that they're making political progress into our community, and Africans are coming to grips with the PPP domination. And I even among our rank and file people, I have heard people arguing, you know, the PPP jacket don't buy out to people, you know, this, that, you know. So that was a mood up to the day before the shooting of Bacchus. But since the shooting of Bacchus and the subsequent protests, that action have answered the question and transformed the mood in the African community and in the entire country. Nobody, all of them who are writing in the papers that black people defeated and black people don't listen to this body and black people ain't interested and some of you just misleading people, they see the popular response. Okay? And that, in political terms, that is the most significant political social action, okay, between when the PP come to power to now, that took place in the African community. And I want us to look. You asked about the march in particular. But before we go to the march, you know that for many days the people in Golden Grove and the surrounding areas have been carrying out protests on the public road. Very peaceful, well-organized protests, not by any political party, but by their own community groups that they developed, and they were engaged in the self-activity in defense of one of their residents, the city residents. And the police presence was there throughout those activities, all the days of the activity. Okay? Then came Sunday, the day when the funeral was. And the community tore out in their thousands. One of the largest funerals, okay, in the country since the pandemic. One of the largest. Black people tore out there in their numbers, young, old, indifferent, in their numbers. And when you look in the newspapers, the Monday newspaper carry nothing. The Tuesday newspaper carry nothing. And nobody, by any standard, you can't say that is not newsworthy activity. It's probably one of the most relevant newsworthy activity at any paper who engage in democratic and free press would have highlighted at some point in their papers within the last 48 hours, but nothing. And I was forced to write a letter, okay? But we're not dealing with the letter now. Okay, let me get to the march itself as distinct.
Was the letter published?
Well, the letter was published only by Stabrook News, but they butchered it up.
Okay.
And critical elements of the letter, okay, they knock out, you know? And we probably will get to that as we discuss.
I just wanted to know.
Yeah. But the rest don't care. They publish it, but they do the thing on it. Now we asked about the march itself. I say the march was necessary. The march was legitimate. I'm saying I support the march in its totality. But before I go there, I want to clarify something, because we've been making it over and over. I have always said, long before the PUP come to power, I have developed an attitude to public protest. And in my long years of political activism in the country, I can't remember any significant protests by the rich and the powerful in this society. All protests that I know in my lifetime of any significance is not the rich and the powerful, it's being the poor and the powerless, the ordinary people, working people, sugar workers, bauxite workers, blah, 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 unemployed. Therefore, the phenomenon of protest has been an important instrument of ordinary people to express, okay, their concern, their rejection against domination, bad treatment, discrimination, etc. And I took the attitude that I will never denounce a protest. I don't care what is the consequences of that protest. I accept it as collateral damage. After the protest, in my interaction with people, I will use whatever opportunities to explain to people the weaknesses, the engagement, the plus and the minus. There's after the protest at some convenient time. But I will not use my public position to attack any. I don't care whether it's an Indian protest, an African protest, an Amerindian protest, a Jumbie protest. Once the Jumbies are ordinary people, Ogunse will not condemn the protest. I don't care what is the collateral damage. So having said that, let me look at the protest on last Tuesday. Now, I got to give so much background, but I think it's necessary.
All right.
Because
let's go ahead.
people say all kinds of things.
Mm-hmm.
Tuesday, a little before midday, it was about 9-10 o'clock. I was at Border Market looking some greens to prepare to go and cook something. And while I'm passing through the market, I hear people saying, they should let people protest, they should let people. And my mind clicked. I said, the point was talking about the funeral. But then as you move on, you hear the same kinds of things, then I realize that something probably is happening somewhere. And then I got a phone call from a comrade who said, yeah, the protest? I said, what protest? He said, there's a protest coming down from Golden Grove to Georgetown. And then he started giving me some information. Then I quickly went home and I made contact and I got a sense of what's happening. I make that to say that if this was an organized planned protest, I Ogunse would have known. I want to be in Border Market buying greens to cook. So I think it is important because there's a lot of propaganda, because the WPA people have had some influence in helping to create the atmosphere to keep and sustain
The mood and
the mood of the people that protest. Okay, people trying to use that, to say, you plan the thing. But if WP had any planning with it, I was going to say would have known. So so much for that. Okay. Now, I am arguing that the violence that erupted at the protest was deliberately planned by the PPP with the collaboration, okay, at the very high levels in the police force. Okay? Now, the first time I got a bit concerned is the Friday before the funeral, the Friday. I began to hear people calling me and said, you hear they're going to court to free the man, the family will fight some habeas corpus to get the man free. Then I began to reflect on it. And I remember that that device is only used when the police deny citizens, family, the arrest a citizen. The police have them for certain time, denying,
you don't know where they are.
You don't know where they are, denying the family contact with the prisoner. Okay, so you move the court to ask the court to let them present the body.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now this man was in police custody workplace, in the custody workplace.
Mm-hmm.
He was in contact with his family. There's video that he was even accessing social media. He had his cellular phone. Therefore, it struck me that why would you need a habeas corpus procedure? But after the fact, it became clear to me what happened. They set that process in mind deliberately. And I want the Commissioner of Police, and I want the Minister of the Home Affairs, I want Jagdio, okay, and Ali to point to me one other occasion when a police officer is on close arrest, house arrest, whatever arrest they call it, all the terms, close arrest, whatever arrest, that they had to file a habeas corpus in the court. The family had to file it. Let them show me one precedent other than this. They can't show you. And this is where the plot began to this is where you got to understand the unfolding of the plot. So by doing that, they send out the word that the man will get free. They know it's going, and they make sure that it is known throughout the place. So it creates a kind of anxiety among the residents of Golden Grove and so forth and so forth. So, and then when the funeral was such a large funeral, okay, they decide that, look, we got to find a way to close this thing off. Okay? And they decide that, look, we're going to bait them into a demonstration. So they circulate around the protesters in the area that the man get free. And of course, spontaneity, because I only could argue for spontaneity, because here the police says spontaneous, I hear people in the community say spontaneous, here reporters saying spontaneous. And my gut feelings is spontaneous, that people, they hear this story and they just decide, look, as we there here, let me go down to Georgetown, I'll be okay, and they start the protest. But it's interesting to note, because most of the protest was on social media. Mm-hmm. And if you follow the government approach, normally, when you got a protest on any road, the protest may be blocking traffic. So the police have to fight between the protesters and the traffic. In this particular case, they surrender that part of the street to the protesters, and they direct the traffic, okay, by another half, another major highway in the East Coast. Therefore, you have miles of the protesters coming from Golden Grove right down to Monipo is miles to pass. Okay, long stretches where the road clear of traffic. Only the protesters and the police and probably whoever the residents who live in the area. So, if the police intention was to stop the march before the march reached the Georgetown, they had numerous occasions where they could stop it. And as Paul Snow pointed out in the program, conventional police tactics would have stopped it at a point in time where
it would not have been.
It would not be create that a collateral damage, because any part of the world, police know when you go to stop a protest, You always got to anticipate that there is going to be an increase in tension and there could be some unexpected consequences. And you got to anticipate that. Therefore, you're not going to stop a protest, okay, like that in a marketplace. You stop a protest that, let me say, if you're passing a cemetery or a large area, people planting and so forth and so forth. But no, that protest, people can access the thing and you see it go past even an important point where they pass soldiers and police on the ground. No intervention by the police. But when they reach Monipol, that is where the PPP plan, okay, to discredit the protest. And they had in the area, they planted people, okay, and then they unleashed the violence. Unfortunately, some of the protesters also get themselves caught up in the thing, not realizing what was happening. You see? So this was because people passed through Indian areas some miles, not an attack on any Indian person. But when the police decided to block them in that vicinity, where the PPP had the trap well planned, okay, that led to the chaos. So, for me, the protest was a great success. What took place in terms of violence was the handiwork of the PPP that is responsible for it, and it's not the first time. I've been pointing out, this is other point, is a pattern the PPP has been employed since from the Desmond, the height period of protests, where they infiltrate the protests. Okay, I remember one of the first time when they first used this method, I was at Agda. You know, Agda had the headquarters just behind
the cathedral.
The cathedrals there. And you know that close to Tiger Bay, in vicinity. And African persons from Tiger Bay, young people, were coming and showing the money they get for beat up Indians, for the PPP people. So PPP had people recruiting them, paying them money to beat up people. I see them in my own eyes. The boys bring the money and show me. And we had to get them a talking about that they're being used. But they didn't care at the time because all the concerns money, and they said tomorrow they hope to get more money tomorrow. So that was the tactics, and it worked because those tactics discredit the protest and force Height to withdraw the protest. So from that have been the PP major weapon to deal with African protests, okay? And the second weapon is to use the police and the security force to engage in excess violence against us. Those are two hallmarks of PPP. You see?
Yeah, but the whole question of you talked about the violence and the fact that they allow the protests to proceed and actually sought to halt it at a juncture where they knew that they were possibly going to be collateral damages, apart from the people whom they planted in there. Apart from that, you mentioned that the strategy used is to create the situation where they're making it appear as though Africans are taking advantage of Indians, and then we spoke only a week or two before, David and I, we were on Politics 101 when we were talking about Quentin Bacchus' killing. And I did mention on that program that the feedback is that they already have the rubber bullets, the water cannons, and all of the artillery ready and prepared for any protest. Now, obviously, they saw the Quentin Bacchus thing as bringing what they thought was docility of Africans to their actions, bringing back that kind of vibrancy and the feeling that action must be taken against them for what they have been doing. And so they wanted to demonstrate by some means that if you are to step in what they view is out of line, that we have things prepared for you, so that we are going to demonstrate to you that if you are going to take action, that this is what is going to happen. They wanted to bring that to the people. So when they set up that arrangement for the protests to get into that area where they planted people to destroy and to create mayhem and so on, their strategy was to get black people to understand that we got our weapons, we got the soldiers behind me, we got the police behind me, and you got to go back in your place. All right, that is the intention, you know. That is the intention, to beat you down, to demonstrate it. Because why is it you have police running all through the streets when people are basically walking peacefully in their village and shooting randomly and wildly, you know, to the point where innocent people are again becoming victims of the excesses of the state. All right. So, and then they, subsequent to that, they placed soldiers back into the communities with police and so on. So you again began to militarize the villages and to put them under subjection, to make them appear as though they are prisoners in their own communities. Okay? So all of that is the psychology behind telling black people that you don't have any alternative but to bow down, to accept, and to be compliant with whatever we do against you in this country. Right? But is it going to work? I wonder.
No, it can't work.
Mm-hmm.
Because, look, the PPP, any government can buy whatever weapons they want.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's from bullets or live bullets, tear smoke, or whatever, water cannons.
Mm-hmm.
But they have to be manned by people. If the police, government give the police a weapon well loaded with live ammunition and send them to a protest, and the officer put the ground say shoot, and instead of shoot, the soldiers put the guns up in the air and then shoot, or shoot in the air, or put the guns down to the ground and shoot in the ground, and they refuse to shoot at the protesters, it makes a significant political statement. The point I'm trying to make is that the government could supply them with whatever they want in terms of ammunition. It boils down to the human factor. And in this case, it's an Indian-dominated government operating in an environment where the security forces, police, army, blah, 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 is predominantly African, giving African personnel instructions to beat up, to shoot African people, and African personnel doing it, okay, it becomes an African issue. It's not even a matter of the PPP anymore. As I illustrate to you, the government, the United Nations say, the military office is very clear. You don't carry out illegal actions. The police know that the rules about excessive use of force. The police know and train in the context of the engagement. So there's no excuse there. The police vote, okay, an army, almost 95% or 98% for the African Party, whether it's the PNC or the APMU. So we're dealing with actors who, for whatever reason, which they could explain, that because they're in uniform and they're part of the state machinery, they're behaving docile and they're prepared to carry out any orders given, even knowing in the context of it. All the policemen must know Hickens is a PPP plant in the police force. They can't deny from top to bottom. So they must know when they get certain instructions of a certain nature coming from the leadership of the police force, they must question it. They must use their common sense. The same thing goes to the army. So there's no excuse here. There's no excuse. And the African community has to start by recognizing that this is an African problem. It's a problem about we, brothers, sisters, children shooting at we, beating we. And we got to discipline them. Forget about the PPP. This is not an African Indian matter. This matter have to be addressed by we. And the time, once we get our comrades in the army and the police to do the right thing, act constitutionally and legally, the PPP now will have to resort to bringing out Indians and put them in uniform if they wanted to carry the hostility against Africans and change the whole engagement. You see, one of the worst forms of oppression in ethnic reality is when the powers of the other side is able to recruit your people and use your people to kill you. It is the worst form, okay, of human oppression. I hear people complain, a lot of Indians complain about, you know, the Burnham years and stuff. Burnham then using Indians or people to oppress Indians to the extent that Indians got oppressed was Africans using to oppress Indians. But the Jagdion PPP formula from 92 is to use Africans in a racist, deliberate way to oppress Africans. And it is the worst form of ethnic oppression because it forced me to deal with it. And it forced me to deal with my own. You know, seriously. And it got consequences. But we will have to do it. We have to stop African police and soldiers to believe that they could shoot me and come back home and nothing happen. We have to end it. And once we end up, we transform the political engagement. Because the people will have to make a decision to continue the posture of using the state to brutalize the African community. They will have to they make a conscious decision to use their own kind. And they're not going to want to get it easy. So I'm saying the way to deal with the PPP and Jagdio on this matter is to politicalize our community. Okay? To the point that our people in uniform know what is the correct behavior. And when they go out of line, they pay the price. That is the solution.
I heard Travis had a beautiful program with Council Todd and former Assistant Commissioner Slow and so on, where they were discussing the legality of the entire operation. And the fact that Watts and the others top-level policemen were on the ground was called into question, because what Mr. Slow was explaining, that you never, in any situation, send out your top brass into the when the Russians had to send their generals into the field, it became a big thing in the international media, because it demonstrated that, well, look, the Russians were in disarray, that the generals had to come out, you know, of the command center to go onto the fields to give direction to soldiers who were on the battlefield. But here we have it that all of these top men were out there and were leading the charge. These are basically, like you said, agents of the PPP. These agents that we're talking about, you mentioned that we need to deal with black people. How do we deal with the people like Watts and Hickane and these guys?
You see, there's a painful question you asked me.
Right.
It's painful. Because you asked me the question when we was in government in 5 years. Those elements should not have been in the police force. So today there could be an issue for us. We should have get rid of them. Granger, the APMU plus AFC administration have done a grievous crime to us by allowing Hickens and company to remain in the police force. And today they could be used against me. No, I don't want to get there because it really woke up some passion.
Okay.
And again, it's we problem. It's we do it. Not the PP keep them in the force. It's Granger, we keep them in the force. And now they turn upon we. Not a PPP problem.
They turn again.
Yeah. So it's not a PP problem. It's we problem. But anyway, spare me though.
Now the protest itself, I was happy, you know, when there are, because people are conscious, despite what might have transpired. I have heard Indian people rebuking Air Finale at the protests. At least 2 women were saying, if I didn't kill the people, this wouldn't happen. how many Indians are of that mind to understand that what transpired is as a result of PPP excesses?
Well, I mean, it's hard to predict
Yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of numbers, but I know the first set of information we began to get about the PP involvement came from Indians at
Okay,
Monrepo.
okay,
They the first, that's the first set of information we began to get from Indian people in Monrepo. Okay? And then if you know Monrepo market, you got the front and then the market is into the community. And a lot of the violence and stuff take place at the back, where the protesters were in front.
okay.
But I'm telling you, the first indication we get from Monrepo, from Indian people, provide the information. So yes, I don't think the PAP have that total control of the Indian community that they're not thinking Indians. They are thinking Indians, okay, but there's a difference between Indians who may be disgusted with the PPP or who may have questions about the PPP to bring them into activism against the PPP. This is a higher stage. But there always has been, and I will go far to say there will always will be Indians who would see through the PPP. And I will say the same thing. There are always going to be Africans who will see through the PNC or you see through the WP. You know, Guyanese are not that docile. But there's a difference between recognizing a problem and recognizing your role in the solution of the problem. There's a more deeper understanding of matter. So yes, there's a number of Indians who, because these things can't hide. What do people forget? If you're recruiting Africans to kill Africans, it's we recruiting, it's happening in we space, among we family, we gonna know. Like how it was revealed that they're using private security forces, okay, in the you know, to do police work at Golden Grove. And among one, the private security force was an Asian national who they put in Guyana police uniform. And who we will detect, because we have been working with the Asian community in Guyana. So you know they can't; these things can't hide. What the people do in Monrepo there, Indians know, can't hide. They can't, not a secret. So people know, but not because they know, they will come to front and to reveal what they know. So it was good that those two women was able to confront, you know, Ali and put it pointful to him that you is the problem. You know.
The other thing that I'm concerned about is the response to they have set up this arrangement where their agents would have acted in ways, and of course other people seeing that taking place, some of the people who were protesting peacefully got involved. But they're painting this image of black people as, you know, always trying to make it appear as though hooliganism and you know, the way the actions of Africans are always to be ridiculed. Now, protests across the world, even in the United States, in Europe, and so on, once it gets to a certain level, then collateral damage is always a factor. Does it mean that, I mean, that people, you're putting them to the base of being beast and inhuman and all of these things? Characterization of people as...
You see, it's racist. You got two kinds of propaganda. You got the racist propaganda, open racist propaganda, and then you got the class propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
You see, you got to remember, Guyana is a class divided society. You know, even though the class factor is not so dominant in the consciousness of the race engagement. So you have the class prejudice because, as I told you, historically it's only the poor who demonstrate, and historically, if properties or stores is to get damaged from protests, is the rich. So they have developed over the time a certain attitude to protest, which is prejudiced by the class position. It was true from the colonial times, okay, and the colonial attitude to the state protest was to protect the white people property and the colonial power. The same thing here. So there's the class factor. And the class factor may also cut across race. People with property always got a fear for protest. Because they intend for protest and nothing because they got other ways to solve the problem. So you got the prejudice. And then you got the open racial propaganda against protest. And you know it because these people they have no consistency. I going to say, and I ask them to produce one record, letter you write, condemning any Indian protest. I never condemn Indian protest in Burnham time. And up to today, and I was glad to be part of an APMU government that never repressed Indian protests. Because if they had repressed Indian protests, I would have had to speak out. But I had to because the government never did it. So for me, I've demonstrated consistency on the matter. A lot of them who engage in them racist interpretation, they're not interested in peace. They're interested in promoting race war. And that's what they're trying to do. By demonizing African protests and criminalizing it, working together with the PPP agenda to create an atmosphere in the country for race war. And we have to understand it. You see? Now, over the months, we were asking when we're going to hit the streets. And many times I tell you, while I agree, we need to hit the streets, I always raise the question of pandemic. And you always remind me pandemic. But I'm saying, we have now got to recognize in the African community, we have passed the threshold. Pandemic or no pandemic, we begin to occupy and protest the streets. We're in a new phase. And we have to continue along the line. We have to continue. Okay, we must not come off the streets. We must, every African community, in their own time, their own way. Okay, when one get a little tired, the next one raise up. No one get tired, and then we can start to rise up together on all kinds of things. The point I'm making is, we were arguing and we were saying when we can come on the road. Now we come on the road. Now we prepare to take the risk with the coronavirus and so we must get something out of it. And we have to, one of the important things is to stay engaged. Because if you want to discipline the African police, you have to let them come close. They got more than one way to discipline them. We could discipline them when they come home, because they got to come home to me. Put them under fires. We could discipline them when we reach them in the community. We could discipline them. We could discipline them when the rulers send them to oppress we, and we in direct contact with them, we could talk to them. Okay? And my sense of strategy is this. We must have so much African protest that they gotta get the police all over. Bring we brothers and sisters among we, so that we could educate them. And we want to bring them fancy weapons so we could see them and learn about them. You see, there's more than one way to build a cat. You know, you see, in a battle, you got to use the enemy tactics to do your advantage. So we ain't frightened them bringing out African police at we. We can make them bring them, you spread them along the place. Bring them out to we. And we gonna give them the education on the ground.
I want to ask you a question. The WP has been promoting a day of protest for July 4 at Buxton. And that would have been before the Tuesday's protest. Do you have a sense that the PPP used Tuesday to tell people that, well, look, this is what's going to happen if you all only come out on Tuesday, on Monday to protest? That they were laying the ground to beat people back from demonstrating in any way?
It probably, but because they don't want demonstration, they don't want African protests.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm glad you raised the activity, and we want to invite all people, all Guyanese, but in particular the African community, from all over the country. Monday is CARICOM Day, it's a holiday.
Mm-hmm.
And there will be a demonstration in Buxton beginning at 10 a.m. And we're inviting people from all parts of the country to descend upon Buxton so that we can make a statement to this government on a number of issues, including the killing of Bacchus and our demands for justice, that the police officer involved be charged, the discriminatory way in which the PPP have been dealing with doling out the oil money, and all the other ills that we have been complaining about and that we were saying we need action on. We have a chance now to assemble Monday in Buxton, okay, to let our collective voice and our collective presence make a statement to this government, the region, and the world. So we pass talk, we pass all the debate upon Groundings, all the debate upon Camps TV. Dr. David, politics want to know what we going to do and when we going to do. We pass the stage that we're doing. And we want everybody who is asking what we going to do and when we going to do, back your mouth with your bodies in Buxton. Because that is the way struggle goes. You can't go riddle, blah, 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 blah. And when it's time now for you to make sacrifice and to come and make yourself be president, you turn up. So this is another test for us. The people in Golden Grove passed the test as it relates to the Bacchus killing. They maintained the ground from the day of the shooting up to this day. They're still protesting. And they turn out in their thousands in that area to make a historic statement. We have to build on that. So all of them around, all them African people and African organizations, all of them who used to call them or go and say in private and thing and complaining and asking when something will happen. And I used to tell them, I can't answer because the nature of social processes of such that many times it's the enemy, the other side, the government, is creating conditions for the thing to develop. It's not something you could always sit down in an office and plan to find teeth comb. But the point is, once it happens, we the political people, we the cultural activists, we the players in the African community, we the players in the nation, have to build on it. And this is the challenge. And we carrying the challenge, you know, Camps TV, WPA, you know, Guyanese Against Racial Oppression, Buxton Morning Program, the organizers. Known organizers, this is important. In this case, it is a known, the organizers are known. This is not spontaneous organizing in Buxton. We're rallying in the conventional way, where it is known who organizing and who taking responsibility for the activity. We taking responsibility for the activity in Buxton, and we intend to have a peaceful demonstration in Buxton, and we're hoping to bring out thousands to make a political statement. This is no secrecy. This is no clandestine activity. It's a very clear public engagement of a political nature. They're playing games here now. This is a political protest. They make a political statement in Buxton in support of Golden Grove and in support of all the grievance since the PP come to power that we'll be complaining about.
I want to look at the response of the PPP. To the Bacchus killing, there was never a visit prior to Tuesday. There was no talk about giving psychological and psychosocial support and helping with the burial and all of these things. How do you factor that in with the immediate response of the PPP to what transpired at Luziknan? And
no, it's clear. Honestly, you know, I don't like waste time on those kind of things because we know the preferential treatment. But I'm glad when they do it, because when the PPP discriminate against us in that obvious and public way, the whole world, the diplomatic community they here, the United Nations, everybody could see it. It's in the plain public space. So for me, if they had sense, they wouldn't do it. And if they don't do it, they make it difficulty for me. But when you see they begin to show the racism, okay, and the misgovernment, governance, and the discriminating matter in public, I like it. Because it make me struggle, and we struggle easier. We ain't got to argue no more. The evidence they provide us first. So unlike how people's grown and grow up, the people, we recognize it, we can act upon it, but we don't make it that okay. The focus of we struggle. We understand it and we use it to be advantage. Let it keep doing it. If they believe shooting black people is the solution, let it keep shooting we. Because they be creating the condition for their own destruction. Because if they keep shooting back people, people shoot back at you. So this is my approach to these matters. I am a tactician. You see? So when I confront the political situation, I look at it like if it's in a war office. You understand every move the other side is making, and you try not only to stop the move, but to turn the move to your advantage. And this is what we got to do. As activists and leaders in the African community, we have to interpret this thing. A lot of people are doing, doing the other part of the work, like responding and showing what the people, they're doing this, doing. A lot of programs are doing it. But we have to use this program in the little space that we have to provide some more strategic kind of thinking and discourse. Because the popular response and the popular thinking is very much out there. But we got to begin to think. Now, we got this big question. And this question faces us since the people come to power. When you discuss protests in the African community, people want to hear about protests to remove the government. You see? Mm-hmm. So, and some people say, unless we protest to move the government, they're not interested. You see? Now, that is an understandable response from people who are oppressed. Because you believe that, you know that the government is responsible in a major way for your oppression, their common sense will say, if we remove the government, it will end the oppression. That is a very simplistic and understandable way. Okay? But removing a government is not an easy matter in the context of constitutional democracy, where we buy into constitutional arrangements say remove government by elections. It is not an easy matter. Therefore, when you're talking about removing the government outside the electoral arrangement, you're talking about a different form of struggle. You see, political parties, because they are committed to elections, they know that the way they're going to come to power is through winning the elections. And they're faced with this situation could say, well, look, there's no need to fight up too much. All we got to do is keep people politically engaged and wait till 2025, okay, and we will defeat the PPP and we come to power. That's why PPP get defeated in 2015 and they say we bid with time, we get them, we can get back in. That's how political parties are schooled, or electoral parties. So you have that culture in the equation. Now to move culture from that electoral focus to removing the government outside the ballot box, you've gone into a new area of activity, what they call revolutionary politics, non-conventional politics. And that is a politics that opens a totally new game. But many countries have had to walk down the road. Many people have to walk down the road. But I say all this to say that we have to have a clear vision in the African community about the outcomes of these present engagements as we go forward. We have to have a clear political outcome. I start to show you what is electoral party is concerned. Their concern is to get to the elections and use everything to get them to the elections. So even if they promote a protest today, it is to get advantages to carry them to 2025, if there's a date for the elections. Okay? Mm-hmm. So they don't settle in their head
That
This
they gotta
government
wait
ain't coming down
till it.
until the elections. People who believe that they're so hurt that they want the grievance address, they've got a different agenda. We want this government come down before 2020, okay? And therefore their whole attitude to protest will be different to the political parties, okay? Now I am arguing that the Guyanese community, African Guyanese community, we got two sets of, you got to get two sets of understanding. But we're going to put aside the national understanding for the moment. We're
Right.
talking about
We
the
are almost
African.
on time, so just,
Okay, we're talking about the African community on this matter. The African community, we'll continue the next program.
Yeah.
But the African community have to define what is it we want going forward from this new phase where we unleashing a series of protests. We have to have a political endgame that is clear, okay? And we don't have enough time, okay, to discuss that. But I'm saying, as we bring people forward, we have to clarify publicly and privately what is phase one, what we intend to achieve in phase one. So there'll be no confusion, okay? And it has to be in public. No secrecy. They can't spring so many plans. They're trying to plan with David Hines and Ogunsi and Kodaki and Dion planning some overthrow the government. If we're going for the government, it's going to be a public demonstration by the people. They're going for the government. If we're going for the government, we say no, we're going for the government. This is a limited protest to achieve X, Y. This is what we're going for. We got to be smart because they're going to be hatching up plans that people got secret things to overthrow the government. But my position is when we decide we're going for the government, just to go in every part of the world in Sri Lanka, people there in the streets to bring down the government for mismanagement, the whole world know what it's trying to do, bring the government down. The same thing in Guyana, when we reach the point, the whole world gonna know no conspiracy theory could work. We have to take away from them the ability to manufacture bogus plans and to try to accuse people of trying to overthrow the government when you're trying to overthrow the government. We got to stop it for this.
All right, that's a good way to end. But next week, I want to deal with these imbeciles like the Prime Minister. And, I think we need to focus more on this guy, Mark Phillips, and the docility of the Bens and them. Because, like you said, dealing with the African community is a crucial thing. And for them to come out with those outlandish kinds of pronouncements, it really tells you that something is really wrong with them also. All right?
Mention it for this.
Right. So next week we'll have to deal with those elements, all right?
Mention it for this. Mention the protest again. Boxing
Yeah, but remember the July 4, the
Monday.
July 4, the protests at Buxton. So all those who, you put your money where your mouth is and be there to demonstrate peacefully that we are ready and we are not taking any more of this. Do enjoy the rest of your evening. See you next week. Same time, same channel for another program of Walter Rodney Groundings. Good night.